How's everybody doing? Great to have you here tonight. Hey, I love these dedication weekends, in part because we always have new guests. Maybe you're a family member or a friend of these families that dedicated and you're in church with us today. I'm really glad you're here. And if you live in the area and you don't have a church home already, I just want you to know that you're totally welcome here. We would really love to have you here. We're starting a new 3-week teaching series today. It'd be a great 3 weeks to do this. I am reminded that a number of years ago, after a dedication, I was in the Commons area after a service, and I met a family member who was here for the first time. They were as guests, and the guy I met, he's like, "Oh, this is fantastic. I don't really go to church, and I loved it. Just loved every part of it." And I said, "That's great. Of course, I want you to know you're welcome here. I hope you'll come back next week." And he literally said to me, he's like, 2 weeks in a row? I'm like, well, some people do that. But I mean, if you just can't imagine, if you're here for the first time, you can't imagine 2 weeks in a row. Christmas is coming, another great occasion to come back to church again. So I'm going to start today with a quiz. And I know how much everyone loves quizzes, right? I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. There are some caveats to this quiz that are going to help you out just a little bit. So caveat number 1, if you're new in the last 2 months, you don't have to participate. This quiz is not for you. This is about something that happened a while ago at Suncrest, and I want to test our church to see if they get it. Caveat number 2, I am grading this on a curve. I have set my expectations so low that someone will surely help me to meet those expectations. And, I think maybe the other caveat is this is a group project, right? Now, some of you love group projects in school because you were a terrible student, and some of you hated group projects in school because you were a great student, and it all kind of comes out in the end. This is a group project, so even if you're not so sure, you can just kind of mumble along and you'll probably get a win today. So 2 months ago, 2 to 3 months ago, I did a 5-week series on Romans chapter 12. And we called it Fervor, and there's a verse right in the middle of that. You remember this? Yeah, a verse right in the middle of that passage, Romans chapter 12:11 says, "Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord." And for 5 weeks, we talked about it, and then you all memorized it. And I'm just curious, 60 days later, whether you still got it or not, right? I mean, it was amazing to me what happened in all 3 of our services. And so I'm going to give you the first 2 words, and y'all are going to finish it, right? All right, here we go. Never be
lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord.
Oh my goodness, give yourself a hand. I had pre-written in my notes, I'm like, and that's a solid B+, but that was better. That was better than a B+. I love to take short parts of Scripture that are really meaningful and can shape our lives and our decisions and just embed them in not just our mind and our memory, but in our heart and our soul so that they guide us through life. I have another particular passage of Scripture that I love to do that with, and I could do this one as a quiz from like 4 years ago, but I won't do that as a quiz. I just want you to see this passage from Galatians 5. It says, "The only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love." If you memorized that verse, if that was in your heart and in your soul and guided your life, it would really shape you. I mean, I don't know what situation I'm ever in when this isn't a great piece of advice, right? That the only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. It's telling you the only thing that counts are faith and the love has to come out of faith. And when it's saying counts, it means like for your future. The only thing that's going to help you, the only thing that's going to make a difference, the only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. And I share this passage all the time. If I'm in the Commons area and someone's going through a tough time, I have a lot of 5-minute conversations with prayer where, man, someone is just really struggling in their relationship with their kids, or they just got a diagnosis that they can't, and I'll just try to encourage them. I'll say, hey, the only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. When I perform someone's wedding, I'm going to do my niece's wedding this Saturday, and I'm going to stand in front of her and her fiance, and I'm going to say to them that as you set the course for your marriage, just remember this: the only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. Honestly, after a difficult election season, it's a good reminder to all of us as we interact with one another that the only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. But my favorite setting to remind people of this truth, of this verse, is actually funerals. When I stand in front of people, and of course everyone is thinking about mortality, about the afterlife, about the person that they loved and whether their life counted or not, and about many times who we are. Am I on the course for my life to count so that at my funeral one day? And I just always want people to know, man, if you want to set your life on something, the only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. It's those markers in our life, those pretty simple things that clarify almost everything else. And that's what's going to happen, I think, over the next 3 weeks here at Suncrest. We're finishing up the book of Romans. We'll get Romans 13, 14, 15, and 16 over the next 3 weeks. But even more than just completing our journey through the book of Romans, the next 3 weeks is going to be an ultra-practical encouragement and perspective setter for how to handle things in life. I titled the series, The Way We. That's the practical part. Like, it's going to teach us the way we handle certain situations. So a couple of weeks from now, at the end of the series, I'm going to talk about the way that we stick together. And on that occasion, I think you'll love the very last chapter of Romans, and it's going to talk about different roles that we play in each other's lives. And it might even give you an image of what a calling might be on your life, something God wants you to do, a role he wants you to play in a community. It's going to be a beautiful, beautiful weekend. Next weekend, we're going to talk about the way we disagree. And, this isn't really about the election. I actually would probably want you to think about the person in your life where right now, you guys are not on the same page. You are not on the same page. And you're wondering, what's that going to do to our relationship? What's the future going to look like? And the way we disagree, next weekend's message will talk to us about the way we disagree with one another that gives us a hope that even when we're in disagreement, there can be something beautiful that comes from that. But today, as we end Romans chapter 13, it's going to be the way that we find perspective. Perspective is a beautiful concept. It's the chance to step back and look at the big picture. But if almost all of us are honest, most of us live just a head down life. Right? We are just plowing through. We are just grinding. We are just getting it done. Many, many of us are living at a pace that isn't really a sustainable pace and definitely doesn't let us kind of breathe and enjoy the bigger moments, the bigger picture things of life. We just have to get the next thing done at work, and we have to get the next thing done at home, and there's always something more. It's almost like things are piling up on us. And I tell people all this time, there's always more laundry to do, and there's always more dishes to be done, and the yard always needs mowed, and there's always more bills to pay. And we can get in this mode where we get kind of head down. It's like, man, I just have to think of things. And then while that's going on, of course, there are people in our lives who need us. And even if I thought I could get a moment of rest and relief and a relaxation and big picture, a lot of times it is just met with a question from my child or a crisis in my family or something like that. And it just draws my head down. And then there's problems to solve. All those things are going on. And then here's what I find, and this is a little bit tragic. We could probably all admit this about ourselves, that when we get a moment to breathe, what most of us do is we take our phone and we put our head down and we scroll or we read or we play a game or whatever it is. And there's something about life and the way that we structure it right now that doesn't give us lives that have perspective. There's no eyes up. It's just head down. And the encouragement of Romans 13 for all of us is to say, oh boy, of course you can do that. But you might get to the end of your life and be frustrated. And there have been many, I think, helpful images for what it would look like to gain some perspective in our lives. I read a business book early on when our church was growing and I had to adjust the way I was doing things. And it was really written for small business people who had a skill, but they were starting their own business. They were an electrician and an electrical contractor. And they said one of the biggest dilemmas for people in those situations, maybe you've gone through this, is you're always working in your business, but never working on your business. And you go fix the next, electrical issue, but you never get a chance to say, but where's the business supposed to go? A number of years ago, I got to sit around a small table. It was one of the most wild experiences of my life with a guy named Dr. Ronald Heifetz. He's a professor in the School of Government at Harvard University. He's one who gets to, call Barack Obama and give him his opinion about things. But he was having a conversation about leadership with us, and his image was this. He said, you have to, as a leader, to get off the dance floor and get up in the balcony. Because when you're down in the mix of it, Like you're just doing the next thing. You have to remember the next move. You have to do all those things. But until you get up on the balcony, you gain some perspective. You can look at the whole thing. Then you can see how things play out. I was having breakfast with a good friend of mine just last week, and he was recounting to me a quote that I had shared in a message years ago that he still thinks about. And he said, that one of the challenges in life is if you're climbing the ladder, and then you get to the top of the ladder in your life, you're just climbing the corporate ladder, you're going after it, and you get to the top of the ladder, and you realize, I had my ladder leaned against the wrong wall. My whole life, I poured effort into it. I gave my energy to it. I gave my health to it. I gave all that. And I worked and I worked and I worked. But I climbed the wrong ladder. It didn't work out. This isn't where I wanted to end up. And the problem with this is we don't gain this perspective. A few weeks ago, our family got the chance to go to Florida over fall break. My in-laws have a nice place in Naples, so why not, right? But this was the first time that my 6-year-old had flown on an airplane. And I was just so anticipating this, and it became everything that I wanted it to be. I'm like, Davion, you want to sit by the window? He's like, oh yeah. And then I took this picture of him. And to me, it's just simple. To say, man, if you can get up above something, if you can gain some perspective about the world, instead of just having your head down, plowing through, grinding it out, you get your eyes up. You can really see how some things fit together. So, this passage in Romans 13 is going to give us 2 perspective questions to untangle anything. Now, I brought this little leader hose with me. I know it's pretty small. Some of you can't even hardly see it. But I was thinking today almost like about the timelines of our lives. And maybe you've thought about this if you've ever done like timeline of your life or someone else's life. Like you get to be up above it and you kind of get to see how it works out. And if this was your life, or it's like my life, like this particular leader hose has this spiral on it. There's about 10 spirals, and I think, well, most of you might live to about 100 years, and you could almost think of your life in 10-year increments. And it would be good to take a look at something like this and say, well, was I just grinding when I was 10 years old? You got to do good in school. Right? You won't get into the college you want. And then you're 20 and you're at college. You're like, well, you better do great at college, because if not, you won't get the job that you want. And then you're 30 and you're like, well, I guess I got the job I want, but now I'm going to start a family, and you can just kind of go through life, and you can notice how you could either say, well, I'm lifting my eyes up, or I'm not. And I don't know where you are on this hose right now, but it would be worth saying, like, man, if I'm in my 30s or my 40s or my 50s or my 60s, like, what if I got on top of it and said, am I where I want to be? Romans 13 gives us these 2 questions, and they help us look at our lives to untangle essentially anything. And there is something beautiful about untangling life. Right? If you can bring some clarity to your chaotic situations, like a lot of times that's a beautiful thing to be like, oh, I at least know what I am aiming at, and I know what my next step is. That's good. But I will also say, as a pastor, many, many times when I help someone untangle their thoughts and give them perspective, and it becomes crystal clear what they're supposed to do, it is beautiful, and it's the most scary thing. Because the crystal clear thing they're supposed to do isn't usually the easy thing to do. It's a difficult thing to do. It's a faith step for people. And it's like, now I know what I'm supposed to do, and it untangles it, and it's clear, but it's not easy. And in some ways, that's how I want us to think about this, is to say, okay, whatever you're facing right now, how would you untangle that? So Romans 13 starts, this is actually our last verse from last week. It says, let no debt remain outstanding, except the continuing debt to love one another. For whoever loves others has fulfilled the law. And I just want to make this so practical to those of you who are followers of Jesus and those of you who aren't followers of Jesus. What this is saying to those of us who are followers of Jesus is that we are always in debt to love. Now, you can definitely create a story in your life. I know I can, where I'm like, nope, they owe me love. They owe me. They owe me. Now, if you're not a follower of Jesus, this may not make any sense to you, and fair enough, you'll just get to witness what followers of Jesus think. But those of us who are followers of Jesus understand that Christ gave his life for us, that it's the greatest act of love that someone would lay down their life for us when we didn't deserve it in order to make a way for us into his kingdom. And when someone has loved you like that, the whole idea is, yeah, and you're in debt to love, not just to love him, but what he wants you to do is to love the world around you. Now, this is interesting because in marriage and in relationships, there's a passage, kind of a famous passage in 1 Corinthians 13, and it says this so clearly. It says, keep no record of wrongs. If you want to have a good relationship, if you want to have a good marriage, if you want to have a good friendship, if you want to have a good relationship with your kids, keep no record of wrongs. There's wrong in the mix, right? Somebody did you wrong, you've done them wrong. Address it, resolve it, hopefully find forgiveness. Do not keep a record of it. Don't let it come out later when you're mad at them. Like, remember when you? Keep no record of wrongs. And here's the thing. You're just going to get a window into my life right now. Ironically, one of my great points of pride is that I don't keep records of wrongs. I don't. I mean, I have some people who have really, really hurt me. And as long as they said they were sorry and said it sincerely, like, we're moving on. I do not keep records of wrong. In my marriage, I do not keep records of wrong. I was so proud of myself for not keeping records of wrongs. And then a few years ago, I was thinking about this, and I hope you have this experience when you're reading the scriptures, like you're open to it, you let God get your attention somehow. And this just hit me like a ton of bricks. I thought, I don't keep record of wrongs, but I do keep record of rights. I keep track of the things I've done for you. I could give you the list right now, like for Jenny and I, just in the last month. You want to hear all the things? I keep track of what I've done right for other people, and then if they don't kind of live up to it, coming back my way, I notice. Almost like they owe me, which this doesn't allow. And if you're in a situation in your life where you think someone owes you, it's going to be, it's actually, you could look at your life as like kind of a miserable life, actually. And the idea for those of us who are followers of Jesus is the calling for us is to love. It's a perspective-setting calling. Like, what's the right thing to do in every situation? The answer is love. And it's almost like the passage goes on to say that. Here's what it says. He says, there's other commandments, of course. You shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and whatever other commandments there are, they can be summed up in this one commandment. Love your neighbor as yourself. He's like, this is going to drive some of you nuts, some of you rule followers. It's going to drive you nuts because you want a list. You want a list. And there is a list. You can go back to the old covenant, there's a list. And he's saying to you, of course there's a list. I was trying to help you see the examples of where this one thing is true. And the examples are right. Follow them. But this isn't about the examples. This is about the orientation of your life and of mine. To say, it doesn't matter what the list says. Just love one another. Love your neighbor as yourself, which is a helpful reference because this is going to help us define love accurately in our minds. I know that for a lot of us, we might start to think about love. And like, well, love's great. Ooey gooey, oh, the feelings. Oh, that's sweet. That's not what this love is. I hope it has feelings. It can feel great. It can. But this is a fierce love. This is the love of Christ giving his life for me. And this reference is actually to a story that Jesus told. Maybe you know the story of the Good Samaritan. People came and said to Jesus, well, who's my neighbor? And he said, well, let me tell you a story. There's a guy who gets beaten up, left for dead on the side of the road. Two religious people come past. They both walk past. They had their good excuses. They had to get to the temple. They had to go serve God. They had to do it. But whatever it was, they didn't stop. And then the Samaritan, who was looked down upon culturally, comes by. And he stops. He lets it cost him something. There's a need in front of him. There's brokenness in his path. And he says, of course I have places. Everybody has places to go and people to see. But there's a guy and he's right here. And if somebody doesn't stop and help him, he's going to die. What would love do is the question. And so he stops, and it costs him some time, and he takes him to a hotel, and he pays the guy's bill, and it costs him some money. And Jesus is saying, this is what love looks like. It's not an ooey-gooey feeling. It is a willingness to sacrifice yourself for the greater good. And if you want to ask, who is my neighbor? When Jesus says, love your neighbor as the passage says, love your neighbor as yourself, it's echoing the words of Jesus. It goes on. It says, love does no harm to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law. So this is question number one. This is perspective for you today. In light of love, what's my next move? All the dilemmas that you face right now, all the situations where you don't know what to do, you could ask this question and it would guide you. For the followers of Jesus, who can't put ourselves in a position where someone owes me love, but we're just pouring out what Christ has poured into us. In light of love, what's my next move? See, when some of you are in confusing situations right now, you're facing a dilemma. You don't know what to do. Some of you were thinking about this last week with your primed offering. Like, what do I do? How much do I give? And it's a great question. Well, in light of love, what's my next move? Some of you are in frustrating relationships right now. They are frustrating. And I'm not telling you they're not frustrating. I'm agreeing that they're frustrating. And your son hasn't been treating you right, and you've tried everything you know to do with your daughter, and in your marriage, it feels like it's holding on by a thread, and there's really just one question. Well, in light of love, what's my next move? It can't be in light of what would make me feel good. It can't be in light of what they deserve. That's not a gospel motive. It has to be in light of love. What's my next move? Some of you are in places right now where you're just hesitating. You're hesitating because there's actually something you're feeling like you should do. But if you do that, if you take that job, if you walk away from that money, if you do whatever it is, you think, I'm not sure how it's all going to work out. And you think, what am I supposed to do? And 5 years can pass, and you can be in the exact same place. And I'm just asking you, here's a good question to ask. In light of love, what's my next move? And whatever love would require of you, do that. Some of you, like the story of the Good Samaritan, have an agenda for your life, and you're aimed at it, and you won't let it be interrupted. And there are people who are in your peripheral vision who are crying for your attention, who need someone. And you and I are so focused on what we want to get done, what we must accomplish, the goal that we have in mind. And it would be worth, if you're a follower of Jesus, saying, what if I opened my life to the periphery a little bit? What if I was willing to look over to the left and see the person on the side of the road? And then I decide how I'm going to live my life with this perspective. In light of love, what's my next move? You know, one of the things about this leader hose, it's kind of interesting to me, is it has these spirals on it. And I think this actually works the way love works many times. Sometimes when I do funerals, I notice there's not a lot of enthusiasm about the person who died. And sometimes when I do funerals, I'm like, oh my goodness, the outpouring of what people are saying about this person, this is unbelievable. And it only took me a few funerals to realize how you end up in either place. Because the person who was loved because they loved. This isn't complicated. In light of love, what's your next move? Love, actually, in our world, it comes back around. That when you love others, you'll find love. It's not one-to-one. I can't guarantee it for every situation that you're in. I'm just saying, on the whole, there's a posture of life. If you don't feel loved, the right move is to go love somebody. In light of love, What's my next move? Clarifying and maybe terrifying. Passage goes on. And do this understanding the present time. The hour has already come for you to wake up from your slumber, because our salvation is nearer now than when we first believed. Now, this is introducing something else into our lives. Whenever you're in a conversation about salvation and the day is nearer, it's a reminder to us that there is this life and there is an afterlife. And I don't know if you're prone to think about that. It's interesting. If you look at churches and maybe pastors, I think one of the things you'll notice is that churches tend to swing to one edge of the pendulum or the other. On one hand, some only talk about heaven. And C.S. Lewis had a little bit of a critique for those kind of churches. He said, "You're so heavenly minded, you're no earthly good." But it's also possible that at a church level or a pastor level, actually it's just all about this life. And then to some degree, the church might be doing good work in its area, but it's basically nothing more than a social services agency, just doing some good earthly human work, and it's lost sight of eternity. Now, fair enough, I planted in your mind there to think about churches, and you might even be thinking about Suncrest right now. Where do we fall on that pendulum? But instead of thinking about churches, can I just ask you about you? Are you a person who thinks about the afterlife, about eternity, about salvation really, really, really frequently? Maybe even a little too much, and you lose sight of what's going on the earth? Or is it possible that you don't think about it that much at all? And you get up and you go through your day and you go through the motions and you're grinding and but you never really look up. Some of you think it's a little weird, and I think you're right, that I chose to use like a little leader hose as the timeline of your life, and every spiral 10 years, whatever, it'll come back around. The reason I use this leader hose as your life is because there's another hose that the leader hose connects to, of course. So give Mitch a hand. Isn't Mitch awesome? We love Mitch. And I think, well, let's just talk about this. Let's say this one is eternity. You can see this hose, goes by the piano, goes out the door. Would you imagine with me just for a moment? I know it's an imagination, but that not only does this hose go past the piano and it goes out the door, but it goes out the door of the building, and then it runs down Parrish Avenue, and then it goes past 231, and then it goes past Evansville, Indiana, and it ends up in the Gulf of Mexico. And you think, man, that'd be a long hose, right? And then, of course, we do have this life. It's just a leader hose. It's just a leader hose. And one of the interesting things is to watch people make decisions in this life as if this is all there is. When the scriptures are going to lead us to say, oh my goodness, if you could make decisions in this life that affect forever, that shape the eternities of yourself and other people, how silly would it be to make decisions here that get me something good right there, but lose sight of this? So this is the second question for perspective. In light of eternity, what's my next move? And we can go back through all the examples that I gave you before. What if something's confusing? You probably have confusing things in your life. It's hard to clarify right now. You might have even been confused about, what am I going to give to the primed offering? And it's a great question to say, well, in light of eternity, I mean, I can use my money to do some things here, and I can use my money to have some effect there for me and for others. This is perspective giving. What about in your frustrating relationships? What about when you're in the moment right now where you're just hesitating? You're just hesitating. And the clock is ticking. And it's like, there's not actually that much left of this life anyway. Do whatever would get you some value here. You can think about the conversations that you have with people, the encouragement that you bring to them. It's like, oh my goodness, this is the right way to think about it. The passage goes on. It says, so let us put aside the deeds of darkness and put on the armor of light. Let us behave decently. I mean, in light of eternity, he's going to get to a list here, but let me give you the category. He's going to say, of course there are things that you might choose because you want to feel good tomorrow. Of course, we're all tempted to the instant gratification of life. Of course, you can justify things that will give you a good feeling here. But if you get a good feeling here and it costs you forever, that's a bad plan. He says, let us behave decently as in the daytime, not in carousing, not in drunkenness, not in sexual immorality and debauchery, not in dissension with one another, and not in jealousy. You know what jealousy is? Jealousy is someone climbing up out of the grind and actually getting their eyes up to a bigger perspective. And what they land on is not eternity and it is not love. It's what somebody else has. And then they start aiming their life at that. Rather, clothe yourselves with the Lord Jesus Christ and do not think about how to gratify the desires of the flesh. You see, this is the flesh. It's the earthly things. And earthly things aren't necessarily evil. But they hold no weight compared to the everlasting glory of God's riches. The decisions that people trade on this earth and don't even think about what's to come. I mean, this is where the image in the scriptures bring us to the gnashing of teeth. The gnashing of teeth, I mean, maybe you had a pastor somewhere and he just, he felt like his job was to scare the hell out of you. And, I was about to say that's not my style, but I don't think it's the scripture's style. The scriptures just speak about things honestly. And one of the images that it gives us is that if someone has lived this life and they lived it for themselves, and they lived it not guided by love, and they lived it not guided by eternity, and then they die, and they have what is to come for them. And it would be fair. I mean, we should be honest about this. That we could run two different hoses from here. Because some people have an eternity forever with God. We call it heaven. And some people have an eternity forever apart from God. And if you get to this spot and you're like, I traded this for that, the image that's described is the gnashing of teeth. And the gnashing of teeth isn't pain because you're in the fires of hell. The gnashing of teeth is regret because you miscalculated. You traded this for that. And I can't imagine a more frustrating, regretful experience than being a person who does not live their life in light of eternity. So, if you don't know what to do, if you don't know where to turn, if you're hesitating right now, if you have a relationship that's difficult or frustrating, I think these two questions will clarify for you. It will be clarifying, and it might be terrifying. In light of love, what's my next move? And in light of eternity, what's my next move? I think it actually brings us back to Galatians 5. That the only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. Will you stand with me? I'd like to pray for us. Well, I really hope that was helpful for integrating faith with life. Listen, if you're in Northwest Indiana, I'd love to have you join us in person. Head over to suncrest.org and plan your visit.